so section 5.3, we're going to be talking about writing proportions, and also on top of that, we're going to be solving some proportions. Personal note here, I don't really like how the book originally set this lesson up, so I'm kind of tweaking it a little bit this time and moving things around, and I apologize for the chaos of this, but I actually want to get to this part first. It was just the way that they did things in the book I don't particularly care for, so I'm going to get right to the chase and kind of cut out the middleman that the book wants me to do. So, solving the proportion. So last time I gave you a fraction and it was or a ratio, and we set it equal to another fraction or ratio, and we determined to see if they were indeed proportional because they should both be equal. Well, now this time I've given you a ratio or a fraction of 1/3, and it's equal to x over 12, and your job is to figure out what x is. Well, there's a couple of ways that we can do this. Some of you are already kind of probably doing some mental math in your head and you've already figured out the answer. And if you have, awesome. However, I want to show you the straightforward method, the one way that you're probably not going to get this wrong, and it's called by cross multiplication. More specifically, it's more commonly known as cross multiply and divide. It's just a particular method that gets used a lot in math. And one thing I like to call it is the butterfly. Okay? So what we're going to do is I'm trying to figure out what x is. So I am going to cross multiply and divide, or the butterfly method. And what the butterfly method is basically I'm going to take these two. They are opposite of one another. This is the numerator of one ratio, of one fraction. This is the denominator of the other, and I'm going to multiply these two. So 1 times that is 1/12 times 2. And that's going to be equal to, and there's the rest of my butterfly, 3 times x. Now I can simplify this and just say that 12 is equal to 3x. And this comes in the next part, is the divide. I'm going to divide by 3 on both sides. And that gives me that 4 is equal to x. So the proportion, when solved, is that x is 4. All right? So 1/3 is actually equal to, just to kind of write it out, 4/12. And we know that this to be true because this simplifies into 1/3. This is cross multiplication. Cross them, make a butterfly, multiply. I'll do this next one with you. I'm going to cross multiply. This would give me 5 times y, which is 5y. I'm going to cross multiply here, and this is going to give me 9 times 25. I'm going to do that in the calculator. 9 times 25 gives me 225. Now I am going to divide by 5 because just like with the equations before, we're following that SADMAP. We're trying to get y by itself. That cancels out. That leaves me with y is equal to 225 divided by 5 equals 45. So we found out that y is 45. We have solved this proportion. And like I said, I'm doing it this way because the book goes in a very overly complicated way of doing this, and I'm not wasting my time with you on doing that. It's just pointless. So, look at 7 and 8. Cross multiply and divide and see what you get. What you should have got was that z was 44 and b is 52 when you cross multiply and divide. That should be fairly straightforward and simple. Let's get to something a little bit more complicated, which we call word problems. All right, so I told you in a previous video that the best thing for you to remember when it comes to proportion is this concept. What's on top stays on top, and what's on bottom stays on bottom. And there's another little piece to this that will help you out, is that this side right here, this what's on top and what's on bottom, is what you know. And this side over here is what you want to know. So let's kind of go through a word problem here. I've got a chart here, and what we're trying to do is we've got a recipe for a tomato black bean soup or something like that. It doesn't really matter. And this is what I know. I know that the original recipe calls for 1.5 cups of black beans, and I also know that the original black bean calls for one tomato. What do I want to know? I'm trying to find out my new recipe. So I'm basically trying to make a larger batch. I want to know how many tomatoes are needed in my new recipe when I have 6 cups of black beans. So how would I go about solving this? Well, let's look at that concept. What do I know? Well, I know this as a fact. I know that I need 1.5 cups of black beans. What else do I know? I know that I need 1 tomato. And this is to do my original recipe. And I can't spell tomato for some strange reason. There it is. And that's going to be equal to what I want to know. What I want to know is how many tomatoes does 6 cups to 6 cups of black beans. Now look at something else here. What's on top? Black beans. What stayed on top? Black beans. What's on bottom? Tomatoes. What stayed on bottom? Tomatoes. What do I know? 1.5 cups of black beans and 1 tomato will make my recipe. What do I want to know? If I have 6 cups of black beans, how many tomatoes will I need to make a new recipe? What I know, what I want to know. What's on top, stays on top. What's on bottom, stays on bottom. Now that I have that, it's a matter of butterfly effect, that cross multiplication. I'm going to cross multiply. 1.5 times x gives me 1.5x is equal to 1 times 6 gives me 6. Now I'm going to divide by 1.5 on both sides. And when I do, I get x is equal to 4. And not just any 4, but what? Tomatoes. In order for me to make this new recipe with 6 cups of black beans, I need 4 tomatoes. All right, let's do a few more. Let's go to another word problem here. Let's do number 1. It says, write a proportion to find out how many points the student needs to score on the test to get the given score. So, what do I know? That's one thing I want to try to figure out. What do I know and what do I want to know? Well, there's one thing I know for a fact. I know that the test is worth 50 points. All right? It's 50 points. Well, if I happen to get all 50 points on the test, what would I make? I would make a 100 for my grade. I know that if I get all 50 right, I get a 100. What do I want to know? Well, let's think about it. First off, what's on top? Points. That's what we defined in my no statement. What's on bottom? Basically my grade. I'll leave that one right there. So we can say, we'll put grade there, 100 for my grade, and we have a grade here. All right? So I know that 50 points, if I get all my questions right, I get a 100. What I want to know is how many points do I need to get right in order to make a grade of 84? This is how we set this up. What do I know versus what I want to know? And make sure what's on top, points, stays on top, points. What's on bottom, actual grade, stays on bottom, actual grade. And what we can do now is cross multiply and divide. And I'm kind of running out of room here. So I can say 50 times 84 in my calculator. 50 times 84 gives me that number. 4200 equals 100x, because when I cross multiply 100 and x, I get 100x. Now I can divide this number by 100, and I'm going to have to just do it on a calculator because I'm running out of paper. And it means that x is 42. So I need to get 42 points right, 42 questions, in order for me to get an 84 on the test. All right? So why don't you try number 2 out? So what you should have got is you know that if you get all 75 points correct, it means you get a perfect 100. What you want to know is how many points you need to get correct to get a 96. And what's on top stays on top. What's on bottom stays on bottom. Cross multiply, you get 7,200 equals 100x. Then divide by 100 on both sides, and you get that 72 is equal to x. So what does that mean? It means that in order for you to get a 96 on your test, you must get a 72 points right. All right, so let's do this one. This says use the table to write a proportion. This one we're not even going to solve. We're just going to write a proportion. So what do I know? I know that 104 miles in 4 gallons. I know that for a fact. What do I want to know? Well, remember, what's on top has to stay on top, and what's on bottom has to stay on bottom. So what do I want to know? I want to know how many 78 miles is to an unknown amount of gallons. And that's it. I've set it up. 104 over 4 gallons is equal to 78 over G gallons. We don't know what it is. I've set this up. Now, if we wanted to, we can cross multiply and divide, but that's not what the problem asks. It just tells me to write a proportion. So we're going to do the same thing here. What do I know versus what I want to know? I know that it's 15 inches in 4 years. All right, I know that for a fact that apparently this tree grew 15 inches in 4 years. The second tree, I don't know how many inches it grew, but I know how many years went by. What's on top stays on top, and it's both inches. What's on bottom stays on bottom, and it's both years. What I know for a fact, what I'm trying to find out. 9. The local humane society houses 300 animals. The ratio of cats to all animals is 7 to 15. Write a proportion that gives the number of cats. So what do I know? I know that there's a ratio of 7 cats to 15 total animals. All right? That's what I know because it says so. The ratio of cats to all animals. 7 cats to all animals. This is what I know. What do I want to know? I want to know how many cats there are for a total of 300 animals because we have 300 animals at that humane society. So how many cats are actually in there? Well, now that we've set it up, it's just a matter of cross multiplying and dividing. 7 times 300, let's find out what that is. I get 2100 is equal to 15 times C gives me 15C. And we can do the butterfly just to remind ourselves. 7 times 300 is 2100. 15 times C is 15C. So I'm going to divide by 2100, divide by 15, and I get 140. So C is equal to 140, meaning that there are 140 cats at that humane society. All right, this is it for this particular lesson on 5.3. We're going to be doing this same concept in 5.3 and 5.4. So over the next several days, we're going to be doing the same thing, solving proportions, writing them. What's on top stays on top. What's on bottom stays on bottom. What do you know versus what do you want to know? And we're going to set these problems up the same way every time over the next several days. And as always, you know how to find me, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.